I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I love you so much I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one that faces the garden window, when I heard the knock. Not the gentle tap of a neighbor or the quick rap of a delivery person, but that demanding, insistent pounding that somehow manages to shake both your door and your peace of mind. 6 years. 6 long, quiet years since I'd heard from my son Luke or his wife Rachel. 6 years of birthdays forgotten, holidays spent alone, and phone calls that went straight to voicemail. I'd stopped trying after the 3rd year, when the silence became so deafening that even my hope finally learned to whisper. The knocking continued, growing more impatient. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the front door, my heart already racing with a mixture of dread and foolish anticipation. Through the peephole, I saw them. Luke standing slightly behind his wife, looking uncomfortable in that way he'd mastered since his marriage. While Rachel stood front and center with that smile I remembered too well, the one that never reached her eyes. But what made my breath catch weren't their faces. It was the suitcases. 4 large suitcases stacked beside them, along with what looked like boxes and bags. My stomach dropped as I realized what I was seeing. I opened the door slowly, my hands trembling slightly. "Luke, hi, Mom." His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but he didn't meet my eyes. Rachel stepped forward immediately, that bright fake smile stretching wider. "Caroline, you look wonderful. We heard you bought a new beach house." She pushed past me into my living room without waiting for an invitation, Luke trailing behind her with their luggage. I stood there still holding the door open, feeling like I was watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. What are you doing here?" Rachel was already surveying my living room with those calculating eyes of hers, the same look she'd given my house when Luke first brought her home 12 years ago. "We brought our stuff to move in with you," she announced as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "The timing is perfect, really. We just finished our lease, and when we heard about your new place..." "How did you..." I stopped myself. How did they even know about the house I hadn't told anyone in the family? I'd been so careful to keep my personal life private after years of their judgment and interference. Luke finally spoke up, though he was looking at the floor. Rachel's sister saw the real estate listing online. Small world. Right, small world. Right. More like Rachel had been keeping tabs on me all these years, probably waiting for something exactly like this. Rachel was already walking through my house like she owned it, opening doors, peering into rooms. "This is so much bigger than your old place, and right on the beach, too. You must have gotten quite a windfall to afford something like this." The way she said it made my skin crawl. There was something hungry in her voice, something that reminded me of a vulture circling overhead. I watched her run her fingers along my grandmother's antique dresser, the same dresser she'd once called outdated junk when she was redecorating Luke's apartment. "I didn't buy anything," I said quietly. But she wasn't listening. She was already in the kitchen, opening cabinets and examining my appliances like she was conducting an inventory. "The location alone must be worth a fortune," she continued, talking more to herself than to me. "And with property values these days..." "Rachel?" My voice came out sharper than I'd intended, and both she and Luke turned to look at me. "I didn't buy this house." For the first time since she'd arrived, Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I looked at Luke, my son, who hadn't called me in 6 years but was now standing in my living room expecting to move in. "I inherited it from my sister Eleanor when she passed last month." The silence that followed felt heavy and uncomfortable. Rachel's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, disappointment, and then something that looked almost like anger. Luke just looked embarrassed, which was somehow worse than Rachel's obvious disappointment. "Eleanor left you a beach house." Rachel's voice had lost some of its sweetness. "Eleanor knew about my situation with the family," I said carefully. "She wanted me to have somewhere peaceful." What I didn't say was how Eleanor had held my hand in the hospital during her final weeks, tears in her eyes as she listened to me explain why I spent holidays alone, how she'd made me promise to stop letting them treat me like I was disposable, how she changed her will specifically to ensure I'd have something that no one could take away from me. Rachel recovered quickly. that smile snapping back into place like a mask. Well, that's wonderful. Even better, really. No mortgage payments to worry about. She turned to Luke. Honey, why don't you start bringing in the rest of our things from the car? Luke nodded and headed back outside without a word. I watched him go. This man who used to be my little boy, who used to climb into my lap when he was scared, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this stranger who couldn't even look me in the eye? So, Rachel said, settling herself onto my couch like she belonged there. We should probably talk about sleeping arrangements. The master bedroom has the best view, doesn't it? I stared at her, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that I'd learned to associate with Rachel's presence. The same feeling I'd had at Luke's wedding when she'd seated me at the back table with distant cousins I'd never met. The same feeling I'd had when she'd forgotten to invite me to their anniversary dinner. The same feeling I'd had when she told me with that exact same smile that maybe it was time I gave them some space to build their own family traditions. This is my house, Rachel. Of course it is, and we're family. She said the word like it meant something, like she hadn't spent years systematically cutting me out of their lives. Besides, you're all alone in this big place. It'll be nice to have some company, won't it? As she said it, Luke walked back in with another load of suitcases. Behind him, I could see a moving truck pulling into my driveway. A moving truck. They hadn't just decided to visit. They hadn't just packed a few bags for a temporary stay. They had loaded up everything they owned and brought it to my door, assuming I would just... What welcomed them with open arms? After 6 years of silence, I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I watched more men emerge from the truck, ready to unload boxes and furniture. They had planned this, every detail of it. They had found out about the house, ended their lease, hired movers, and shown up at my door with a smile and an expectation that I would simply roll over and let them take whatever they wanted. Just like always. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said slowly, watching Rachel's face carefully. I never invited you to move in. Her smile never wavered. But something shifted in her eyes, something hard and calculating that I recognized from years of being on the receiving end of her manipulations. Oh, Caroline, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I know this is probably overwhelming. Change is hard at your age, but we're here now, and we're family. You'll get used to it. At my age, as if I were some confused elderly woman who couldn't think for herself, as if I hadn't been managing just fine on my own for the past 6 years while they pretended I didn't exist. I watched through the window as the movers started unloading furniture, and I realized with a sinking heart that Rachel wasn't asking for my permission. She was informing me of what was going to happen, and for the first time in 6 years, looking at my son, who still couldn't meet my eyes, and his wife, who was already making herself comfortable in my sanctuary. I wondered if Eleanor had been wrong about this house being somewhere no one could take away from me. Watching Rachel direct the movers like she owned the place brought back a flood of memories I'd spent 6 years trying to forget. The way she'd taken control of my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the relationship I'd had with my son. By evening, Rachel had completely taken over my house. Her furniture was scattered throughout my living room. Her boxes were stacked in what she'd already claimed as their bedroom. And she was in my kitchen making dinner like she'd lived there for years instead of hours. I sat at my own kitchen table, feeling like a stranger in my own home, watching her move around with that proprietary confidence she'd always had. She'd changed into comfortable clothes and pulled her hair back, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her since she arrived. This was Rachel in her element and control, rearranging someone else's life to suit her needs. This kitchen is actually pretty well equipped, she said, opening my spice cabinet and examining the contents. Though we'll need to reorganize everything. I have a system that works much better than this random arrangement you have going on. Luke sat across from me at the table, scrolling through his phone. He'd barely said 10 words to me since they'd arrived, and when he did speak, it was to agree with whatever Rachel was saying. Watching him now, I tried to find traces of the boy I'd raised, but he seemed like a completely different person. So, Caroline, Rachel continued, pulling ingredients out of my refrigerator without asking. Luke and I were talking, and we think it would be good to get this place appraised, for insurance purposes. I looked up from my untouched glass of wine. Insurance purposes. Well, you need to make sure you have adequate coverage on a property like this. And of course, it's always good to know what your assets are worth. She smiled that bright fake smile again. Property values have gone through the roof in beach areas lately. You could be sitting on a gold mine and not even know it. The way she said it made something cold settle in my stomach. There was that hunger in her voice again, that calculating tone that always appeared when Rachel was working an angle. I'm not planning to sell, I said quietly. Of course not, Rachel laughed, but it sounded forced. Although you have to admit this place is awfully big for one person, and maintaining a beach house can be so expensive. The salt air, the constant repairs, the property taxes. She trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Luke finally looked up from his phone. What Rachel means is that we want to help you manage the property. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. Help me manage right. The same way Rachel had helped me manage my relationship with my son by cutting me out of his life entirely. That's very thoughtful, but I'm managing just fine. Rachel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Are you, though I mean, no offense, but you're 62 years old, living alone in a big house like this, dealing with maintenance and upkeep. It's a lot for someone your age. Someone my age. There it was again. That condescending tone that made me feel like a confused old woman who couldn't take care of herself. The same tone she'd used earlier when she told me I'd get used to them moving in without my permission. I may be 62, but I'm perfectly capable of taking care of my own home. Of course you are, Luke said quickly, shooting a warning look at his wife. We just want to help, but Rachel wasn't backing down. She set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face me directly. Caroline, can I be honest with you? Nothing good ever came after Rachel asked if she could be honest. We heard about this house from my sister, like Luke said, but what we also heard is that you've been struggling since you retired. Living alone, not really taking care of yourself the way you should. We've been worried about you. I stared at her, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. Struggling? Who told you I was struggling? It doesn't matter who, she said, waving her hand dismissively. The point is, we're here now. We can help you take care of this place. Make sure you're not overwhelmed by it all. The audacity of it took my breath away. For 6 years, they'd acted like I didn't exist. No phone calls, no visits, no acknowledgement of birthdays or holidays. And now they were claiming they'd been worried about me. If you were so worried, why didn't you call? Why didn't you visit? Rachel's expression shifted to one of exaggerated patience, like she was talking to a difficult child. We wanted to give you space to work through your issues, but when we heard about the house, we realized maybe isolation wasn't the best thing for you after all. My issues, she was rewriting history again, making my hurt at being excluded sound like some kind of mental health problem that required their intervention. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly did your sister tell you about this house? For the first time since she'd arrived. Rachel looked slightly uncomfortable. Just that you'd come into some property. Valuable property. And based on that, you decided to pack up all your belongings and move in with me. We decided to come help family, Luke interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. I studied his face, looking for some sign of the son I'd raised, the boy who used to be honest with me about everything. Luke, do you even know how I got this house? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You said Aunt Eleanor left it to you. Do you know why she left it to me? Another uncomfortable shift. Because you were close, I almost laughed. Eleanor and I hadn't been particularly close until the last few years of her life. We'd reconnected after she reached out following her cancer diagnosis, wanting to make peace with family members she'd grown distant from. She left it to me because she knew about you, I said quietly, looking directly at Luke. She knew how you'd cut me out of your life. She knew I spent holidays alone, birthdays alone. She knew that my own son had decided I wasn't worth his time anymore. Luke flinched, but Rachel stepped in smoothly. Caroline, that's not fair. You know the situation was complicated. Complicated how? You were having boundary issues. We needed space to build our marriage without interference. Interference. That's what she called my attempts to maintain a relationship with my son. Interference. Eleanor used to call me every few weeks, I continued, ignoring Rachel's interruption. She'd ask how you were doing, Luke, and I'd have to tell her I didn't know that my own son was a stranger to me, that his wife had decided I was too much trouble to deal with. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of something sizzling on the stove. Rachel had turned back to her cooking, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She left me this house, I said slowly, because she wanted me to have somewhere that was mine, somewhere I could be happy without having to beg for crumbs of affection from people who were supposed to love me. Luke was staring at his hands now, and for a moment, I thought I might be getting through to him. But then Rachel turned around with a plate of food and that bright smile back in place. Well, that was very thoughtful of Eleanor, she said, setting the plate in front of Luke like nothing had happened. And it all worked out perfectly, didn't it? Now we can all be together like a real family. Like a real family. The words hit me like a slap. For 6 years, I hadn't been considered part of their real family, but now that I had something they wanted, suddenly I qualified for inclusion again. I watched Rachel serve herself and sit down at my kitchen table, already making plans for their bedroom and discussing which of my furniture would need to be moved to make room for theirs. She talked about paint colors and window treatments like this was her house, like I was just some elderly relative they were graciously caring for. And Luke sat there nodding along, occasionally offering his own suggestions, acting like this was all perfectly normal, like showing up at your estranged mother's house with a moving truck was just another day in family relations. But what bothered me most wasn't their presumption or their entitlement. It was the calculation behind it all. They hadn't come here out of love or concern or even guilt. They'd come here because they'd heard I had something valuable, and they wanted their piece of it. Rachel's sister hadn't just happened to see a real estate listing. Someone had been keeping tabs on me, watching for opportunities. And the moment they'd learned about the house, they'd seen their chance. The question that kept nagging at me was simple if they thought I'd bought this house. Where did they think I'd gotten the money I'd been retired for 3 years, living on a modest pension? How did they imagine I could afford beachfront property? Unless they didn't think I'd bought it at all. Unless they'd heard something else entirely. I looked at Rachel, really looked at her, studying her face as she chatted about their plans for my house. There was something she wasn't telling me, something beyond just wanting a free place to live. And I had the sinking feeling that whatever it was going to be much worse than I'd imagined. I barely slept that first night. How could I? With strangers in my house. Because that's what they were. Really strangers who happened to share my DNA and my last name, but who had become completely foreign to me over the years of silence and manipulation. Their voices drifted through the thin walls as they settled into what used to be my guest bedroom. Rachel's voice was animated, excited even, as she discussed her plans for redecorating. "We should probably start with the living room," Rachel was saying. "That old furniture of hers has got to go, and those family photos everywhere, it's like a museum in here. Those family photos, pictures of Luke as a baby, as a toddler, as a young boy, pictures of the two of us at his school events, his birthday parties, our family vacations, the visual history of a relationship that Rachel had systematically destroyed, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't help but remember how it all began, how Rachel had taken control of my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the relationship I'd had with my son. It started so subtly that I didn't even notice at first. When Luke first brought Rachel home, she seemed sweet enough. A little possessive, maybe, but I told myself that was normal for a young woman in love. She'd smile and nod when I talked, ask polite questions about my work, compliment my cooking. I actually thought we might become close. The first red flag should have been Thanksgiving. Just 3 months after they started dating, I'd spent days preparing Luke's favorite meal, the same menu I'd made every year since he was little. But an hour before dinner, Rachel called. "I'm so sorry. Caroline," she'd said, her voice thick with fake regret. "I'm having a panic attack. I don't think I can handle a big family gathering right now. Luke is staying with me to make sure I'm okay." I'd looked at the table I'd set for 12, at the turkey I'd been basting since dawn, at the pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. Maybe I could bring some food over, or we could do a smaller dinner. Just the three of us. "That's so sweet of you, but I really just need quiet today. Maybe next year." Next year came, and there was another emergency. A work crisis. A friend's wedding. A migraine. There was always something. And Luke always chose her over our family traditions. I started to see the pattern, but I kept making excuses. She was young. She was stressed. She'd come around. The worst part was how she made it look like my fault. At Luke's birthday party the year before they got engaged, she'd planned the entire thing without telling me. I showed up with a homemade cake, the same chocolate cake I'd made for his birthday every year since he was 6, only to find an elaborate store-bought cake already on the table. "Oh, Caroline," Rachel had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You didn't need to bring anything. I told Luke to call you and let you know we had everything covered." Luke had looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He never said anything when Rachel made me look foolish or pushy or like I was overstepping boundaries I didn't even know existed. But it was their wedding that really showed me who Rachel was and what she was capable of. I should have known something was wrong when I didn't get invited to any of the wedding planning. No dress shopping, no cake tasting, no venue visits. When I asked Luke about it, he just said Rachel wanted to handle everything herself, that she was very particular about her vision. The morning of the wedding, I got ready carefully. I'd bought a beautiful navy dress, nothing too flashy, nothing that would upstage the bride. I'd had my hair done professionally for the first time in years. I was so proud of my son, so happy to see him starting his new life. When I arrived at the church, the usher looked at his seating chart with confusion. "Caroline Foster, let me double-check." He walked me down the aisle, past the front rows where Rachel's family was seated, past the second and third rows filled with their friends, all the way to the back of the church, the very last row, next to people I'd never met in my life. I sat there during the ceremony, watching my son promise his life to a woman who had seated his mother behind strangers, and I felt something break inside me. Not just hurt, but a kind of deep, bone-deep understanding that this was intentional. This was Rachel showing everyone exactly where I ranked in their new family structure. After the ceremony, I tried to find Luke to congratulate him, but he was swept away in a crowd of photographers and well-wishers. Every time I got close, Rachel would appear and guide him away to meet someone important or pose for another picture. At the reception, I was seated at a table in the far corner with Rachel's elderly great-aunt who had dementia and a couple who spent the entire evening arguing about their divorce. I watched from across the room as Rachel laughed and danced with her family, as Luke gave a toast, thanking everyone who helped make this day special without mentioning me once. I left before the cake cutting. No one noticed. The isolation happened gradually after that. Phone calls that went unreturned for days, then weeks. Invitations that came last minute or not at all. Holidays where I was told the plans had changed, usually after I'd already prepared food or bought gifts. The worst was probably Christmas. 3 years into their marriage. I'd called in November to ask about dinner plans, wanting to coordinate with Rachel's family if needed. Rachel told me they were having a small, intimate celebration and that they'd love to see me sometime during the holidays, but not on Christmas Day itself. I spent Christmas alone, as I had the year before and the year before that. But that evening, Luke posted photos on social media. Their small, intimate celebration included Rachel's parents, her siblings, her cousins, and about 20 other people I'd never seen before. There were pictures of an elaborate feast, of gift exchanges, of everyone laughing around the Christmas tree. Everyone except me. When I called Luke the next day, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice, he seemed genuinely confused. "I thought you knew it was just immediate family." "Mom, I am your immediate family. You know what I mean?" But I didn't know what he meant. I didn't understand how I'd gone from being the most important person in his life to someone who didn't qualify as immediate family. I didn't understand how the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had grown into a man who could exclude his mother from Christmas without a second thought. The final straw came on my 60th birthday. I didn't expect a party, but I thought surely Luke would call. Maybe they'd take me to dinner, or at least acknowledge the day somehow. Instead, I got a text message at 9:00 p.m. Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry we missed it. Crazy day. That night, I saw more photos on social media. Rachel had thrown herself an elaborate pre-birthday celebration the same day, complete with flowers and champagne and a whole crowd of friends singing to her. Her birthday wasn't for another 2 weeks. The message was clear. Rachel's pre-birthday party was more important than my actual birthday. Her friend's time was more valuable than her husband's relationship with his mother. I tried talking to Luke about it once, about 6 months before they cut me off completely. I called and asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. He'd seemed reluctant, but agreed. I feel like I'm losing you, I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. It's like Rachel doesn't want me around. He'd gotten defensive immediately. Rachel isn't the problem. Mom, maybe you just need to try harder to fit in with how things are now. We're not kids anymore. I never said you were kids. I just miss my son. You see me? I see you when Rachel allows it. And even then, you're different. You're distant. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his coffee cup. Things change when you get married. Mom, your spouse comes first. That's how it's supposed to work. I'm not asking to come first. I'm just asking not to be forgotten. But even as I said it, I could see it wasn't getting through to him. Rachel had done her work too well. She'd convinced him that my desire to maintain our relationship was somehow inappropriate, that my hurt feelings were manipulative, that choosing his wife meant abandoning his mother. 3 weeks after that conversation, I called to invite them for Sunday dinner. Rachel answered Luke's phone. Caroline, she'd said, her voice sickeningly sweet. I think it's time we were honest with each other. Your behavior has been really concerning lately. The constant calls, the guilt trips, the way you try to come between Luke and me. It's not healthy. I'd been so shocked I could barely speak. I'm not trying to come between anyone. I think you need to take some time to work on yourself. Maybe see someone about these attachment issues. When you're ready to respect our boundaries and our marriage, we can talk about rebuilding this relationship in a healthier way. Then she hung up, and that was it. 6 years of silence began with Rachel telling me I needed therapy for wanting to maintain a relationship with my own son. Now, watching her walk through my house like she owned it, directing movers to put her furniture in my living room, I realized nothing had changed. Rachel still saw me as an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be solved. The only difference was that now she needed something from me. The question was, what did she really want? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I got up early the next morning and made coffee, hoping to have a few quiet moments before they woke up. But Rachel was already in my kitchen, rummaging through my cabinets like she owned the place. Morning, Caroline, she said cheerfully. I hope you don't mind I reorganized your spice rack. It was driving me crazy having everything so disorganized. I looked at my spice rack, the one I'd organized exactly the way I liked it, with everything arranged alphabetically so I could find what I needed quickly. Now it was organized by Rachel's mysterious system, which seemed to involve grouping things by color rather than any logical order. I had it organized, I said quietly. Well, now it's organized properly, she replied, not even looking up from whatever she was doing to my coffee maker. Trust me, this way makes much more sense. This was how it started. Small changes, little reorganizations, tiny improvements that weren't improvements at all. Rachel moved my coffee mugs to a different cabinet because the one I used was better suited for dishes. She rearranged my furniture so it had better flow, which mainly meant pushing my favorite reading chair into a corner where it blocked the window. The living room looks so much more spacious now, she announced after spending the morning moving things around. Don't you think honey, Luke, who was sitting on my couch reading his phone, barely looked up? Yeah, looks good. He didn't even glance around the room. He had no idea what she'd changed or whether it looked better or worse. He just automatically agreed with whatever his wife said, the way he'd been trained to do. But it was when I found Rachel going through my photo albums that something snapped inside me. I walked into the living room to find her sitting on my couch with 3 of my photo albums spread out on the coffee table. She was methodically removing pictures, creating 2 piles, one to keep and one to discard. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. She looked up with that innocent expression she'd perfected. "Oh, I'm just helping organize these. You have so many photos, and half of them are duplicates or blurry. I thought I'd help you sort through them." I looked at the discard pile and felt my heart sink. Pictures of Luke's childhood, photos from family trips, candid shots of the 2 of us together, all the visual evidence of our relationship before Rachel came along. "Those aren't yours to sort," I said, reaching for the albums. Rachel pulled them away from me. "Caroline, be reasonable. You can't keep every single photo you've ever taken. Besides, look at this one." She held up a picture of Luke and me at his high school graduation. "It's not even a good shot. Luke is looking away from the camera." It wasn't a perfect photo, but it was one of my favorites. Luke had been embarrassed about something, probably his proud mother taking too many pictures, and he was laughing while trying to duck away from the camera. It captured something real, something spontaneous and loving. "That's one of my favorite pictures." "But why? It's not even flattering to either of you." "Because it showed us happy together. Because it captured a moment when he was still my son, before she came along and convinced him that loving his mother was somehow inappropriate." I reached for the photo, but Rachel held it away from me. "Honestly, Caroline, you need to let go of the past. Luke isn't a little boy anymore. Keeping all these childhood photos around is just sad." Sad. She thought my love for my son was sad. "Those are my memories. And now you can focus on making new memories with all of us together." She smiled brightly and tossed the graduation photo onto the discard pile. That's when I realized what she was really doing. This wasn't about organizing photos or decluttering. This was about erasing me. Erasing the evidence of my relationship with Luke. Rewriting our family history to start from the moment she entered the picture. I watched her continue sorting through my memories, casually discarding moments that meant everything to me, but nothing to her. A photo of Luke's first day of kindergarten. Gone. A picture of him building sandcastles with me on a family vacation. Discarded. A snapshot of him helping me bake Christmas cookies when he was 8. Into the trash pile. "You know what?" Rachel said, holding up another photo. "We should really get Luke to go through these with us. Help decide which ones are worth keeping." The idea of Luke sitting here, looking at pictures of our life together and agreeing with his wife that they weren't worth keeping, made me feel physically sick. "No," I said firmly. Rachel looked surprised. No, those are my photos, my memories. You don't get to decide what's worth keeping." Her mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something cold flash in her eyes. But then the smile was back, brighter than ever. "Of course they're your memories. Caroline, I'm just trying to help you organize them better. But if you want to keep living in the past instead of focusing on the future..." She shrugged and started gathering up the photos. "It's your choice." Living in the past, that's what she called remembering my son's childhood. That's what she called treasuring the evidence of our relationship before she destroyed it. I spent the rest of the day watching Rachel systematically take over my house. She moved my books to make room for hers. She replaced my kitchen towels with ones that matched better. She even threw away a small ceramic vase that had been a Mother's Day gift from Luke when he was 12, claiming it was chipped and ugly. Every change was presented as an improvement. Every erasure of my presence in my own home was framed as helping me become more organized, more modern, more in touch with how things should be done. And Luke said nothing. He sat in whatever corner Rachel had designated for him and agreed with whatever she decided. When she asked his opinion about moving my grandmother's rocking chair to the garage because it didn't fit the aesthetic, he just nodded. "Mom doesn't really need it taking up space in the living room," he said, not even looking at the chair where I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby. That evening, as I sat in my relocated reading chair in the corner where I could barely see out the window, Rachel announced her plans for the next day. "I thought we'd go into town and look at some new furniture," she said, curled up on my couch like she belonged there. "This place needs some updating if we're all going to live here comfortably. All going to live here." She was already talking about this arrangement like it was permanent, like my house had become their house simply because they decided it had. "I like my furniture," I said quietly. "Oh, Caroline," Rachel laughed. "This stuff is so dated, and most of it doesn't even match. We need to create a cohesive look, something that feels more like a home and less like a garage sale." My furniture had been collected over decades. Each piece had a story, a memory, a reason I'd chosen it. The coffee table Luke had helped me refinish when he was in high school, the bookshelf we built together one weekend when he was home from college, the dining room set that had belonged to my parents. But to Rachel, it was just old junk that didn't match her vision of how things should look. I went to bed that night feeling like I was disappearing in my own home. Every trace of my life, my history, my relationship with my son was being systematically erased and replaced with Rachel's version of how things should be. And the most heartbreaking part was that Luke was letting it happen. More than letting it happen, he was actively participating in it. The son I'd raised to be kind and thoughtful and respectful was sitting by while his wife dismantled everything we'd built together. The next morning, while Rachel was refolding all my towels according to her superior method, Luke approached me in the kitchen. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding my eyes. "Mom, we need to talk about something," he said quietly. I set down my own coffee and waited, dreading whatever Rachel had put him up to saying. "It's about the house," he continued. "Rachel's been thinking, and she's right. This place is a lot for you to handle on your own. The maintenance, the utilities, the property taxes. I'm managing fine. Luke, are you, though?" He finally looked at me, and I saw something that looked almost like concern in his eyes. Almost. "When's the last time you had the roof checked or the plumbing inspected? Beach houses need constant upkeep. Mom, one major repair could wipe out your savings." I studied his face, looking for some sign that these were his own concerns and not Rachel's words coming out of his mouth. But I could see the rehearsed quality in his speech, the way he was hitting talking points rather than speaking from the heart. "What exactly are you suggesting?" He took a deep breath. "We think it would be better for everyone if we made this arrangement official, legal. That way, we can help with the expenses. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. Legal?" The word hung in the air between us like a threat. "What kind of legal arrangement? Nothing complicated. Just maybe we could be added to the deed as co-owners. That way, we'd all be invested in taking care of the place, and you wouldn't have to worry about the financial responsibility falling entirely on you." I stared at him, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. They wanted to be added to the deed of my house, the house Eleanor had specifically left to me, the one thing I had that was truly mine. "This is Rachel's idea, isn't it?" Luke's jaw tightened defensively. "We discussed it together. She's just trying to look out for your best interests." Rachel's best interests. More like, I could see the whole plan now, laid out as clearly as if she'd drawn me a diagram. Move in under the guise of helping me. Take over my space gradually. Then convince me to sign over partial ownership for my own good. And once their names were on the deed. "I need to think about it," I said carefully. "Of course," Luke said, but there was something in his voice that suggested my thinking time was limited. "Just don't take too long. These kinds of arrangements work better when they're handled quickly, before any complications arise." Complications. What kind of complications could arise from me continuing to own my own house? I watched him walk back to the bedroom where Rachel was waiting, and suddenly I knew that this wasn't just about them wanting a free place to live. There was something more going on, something they weren't telling me. And whatever it was, I needed to find out before it was too late. That afternoon, while Luke was out running errands for Rachel, I decided to do some investigating of my own. If they were planning something involving my house, there might be evidence of it somewhere. I felt guilty going through someone else's personal belongings, but the guilt was outweighed by the growing certainty that something was very wrong with their sudden appearance in my life. I started with Rachel's purse, which she'd left sitting on my kitchen counter. I found her phone tucked into a side pocket. It was locked, of course. But as I was putting it back, it buzzed with a text message that appeared on the screen. "Any luck with the old lady yet? Time is running out." My blood ran cold. The old lady. That's what someone was calling me in text messages to my daughter-in-law. I quickly memorized the number and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Over the next hour, I went through their belongings systematically. In Luke's laptop bag, I found a folder labeled Mom's House, with printed articles about elder law and something called financial exploitation of seniors. There were also printouts about establishing incompetency and power of attorney procedures. My hands were shaking as I read through the documents. They weren't just planning to get their names added to my deed. They were researching ways to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of my finances entirely. But it was what I found in Rachel's suitcase that made my heart stop completely. Tucked between her clothes was a manila folder containing copies of my personal documents, the same ones she'd been organizing from my desk, my bank statements, insurance policies, and most chillingly, a copy of Eleanor's will. But there were also documents I'd never seen before, legal papers with official letterheads, a petition for guardianship with my name on it, partially filled out, a document titled Assessment of Mental Capacity with checkboxes next to symptoms like memory loss, confusion, and inability to manage finances, and at the bottom of the folder, a business card for a lawyer who specialized in elder care transitions. I sat there on the floor of my own guest bedroom, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy against me, and felt something break inside my chest. This wasn't just about wanting a free place to live. This was about stealing everything I had. They weren't here because they cared about me or worried about my well-being. They were here because someone, probably that mysterious texter, had told them I was vulnerable. An elderly woman living alone with valuable property and no one to protect her. The phone buzzed again from Rachel's purse in the kitchen. I crept back out and checked the message. She's starting to ask questions. We need to move faster. Can't afford to let her figure it out. Another message followed immediately. Remember, once you establish the pattern of confusion, the rest is easy. Judges almost always side with concerned family members. Pattern of confusion. They were planning to create evidence that I was mentally incompetent. All those little comments about my age, about things being overwhelming for someone in my position, about me needing help managing my own life, it was all building towards something. I thought about Luke asking me to make the arrangement legal and realized it wasn't a suggestion. It was the beginning of their endgame. They wanted me to sign papers willingly, but if I refused, they had a backup plan. They would claim I was confused, unable to make sound decisions. They'd point to my disorganized house, my scattered important documents, my inappropriate attachment to old photos and memories. They'd paint a picture of a declining elderly woman who needed someone to step in and take control. And once they had legal guardianship or power of attorney, everything would be theirs. The house, my savings, my insurance policies, everything Eleanor had left me to ensure I'd be secure and independent would be transferred to them. The cruelest part was that they were using my love for Luke against me. They knew I'd want to believe that my son cared about my well-being, that his concern was genuine. They were counting on me to trust him, to sign whatever papers he put in front of me because I wanted so desperately to believe he still loved me. As I put everything back exactly where I'd found it, my mind raced with the implications. How long had they been planning this? Had Luke been in on it from the beginning, or had Rachel convinced him this was really in my best interests? Either way, it didn't matter. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd loved and sacrificed for, was now part of a plan to steal everything I had and lock me away somewhere I couldn't interfere with their new life. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were steadier than I'd expected. 6 years ago, discovering something like this would have devastated me. I would have cried, begged, tried to reason with them. But 6 years of silence had taught me something valuable. I'd learned that some people are capable of cruelties you can't imagine, and sometimes those people share your blood. I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever thought possible, strong enough to survive being abandoned by my own son, strong enough to build a new life without them, strong enough to protect myself when no one else would. I heard the front door open and Rachel's voice calling for Luke. He must have returned from his errands. I took a deep breath, composed my face, and went out to meet them. determined not to let them see that I knew their plans. The game had changed. Now I needed to play it smarter than they were. That evening, while Luke took a shower, I found myself alone with Rachel in the living room. She was scrolling through her phone, occasionally making notes about furniture she wanted to buy for our new place. I watched her, trying to understand how someone could be so calculating, so manipulative. "You've done a lot with the place already," I said, keeping my voice casual. "You must have a real talent for design." Rachel looked up, clearly pleased by the compliment. "I've always had an eye for these things. Growing up, I was constantly rearranging our apartment. It drove my mother crazy, but I just couldn't stand the way she had everything." "Where did you grow up?" I asked, realizing I knew almost nothing about Rachel's life before Luke. A slight hesitation. "Arizona, Phoenix area." "That must have been nice. All that sunshine." "It was hot," she said flatly. "Too hot, and our apartment didn't have reliable air conditioning." "That sounds difficult," she shrugged, but I could see a shift in her expression. "You do what you have to do. My parents weren't exactly planning when they had me, and money was always tight." It was the most personal information Rachel had ever shared with me. I decided to push a little further. "Were they supportive of your education, your career?" A short, humorless laugh. "My father left when I was 9. My mother worked 2 jobs and drank whatever was left of her paycheck. The only thing she supported was her vodka habit." "I'm sorry, I didn't know. Why would you?" "It's not exactly something I advertise." She set her phone down, a faraway look in her eyes. "I worked my way through college. No loans, no handouts. Everything I have. I earned myself." For a moment, I saw something different in Rachel. Not the calculating woman who was plotting to steal my house, but a little girl who had grown up without security, without stability. A child who had learned early that the only person she could rely on was herself. "That's impressive," I said, and I meant it. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished." She looked at me suspiciously, as if searching for mockery in my words. Finding none, she seemed to relax slightly. "When I met Luke, I couldn't believe someone like him would be interested in me. He came from this perfect family, this perfect life. He'd never had to worry about whether the electricity would be shut off or if there'd be food in the fridge." "Our life wasn't perfect," I said quietly. "We had our struggles after his father left. But you had a house, stability. You made him birthday cakes and took him on vacations. Do you know what my birthdays were like if my mother remembered it all? Maybe I'd get a candy bar from the gas station." There was such bitterness in her voice, such raw hurt. For the first time, I began to understand Rachel a little better. Her obsession with control, with appearances, with having the right things, it all stemmed from a childhood where she'd had none of that. But understanding didn't mean excusing. Plenty of people had difficult childhoods without turning into adults who manipulated and exploited others. "Is that why you kept Luke away from me?" I asked. "Because you resented our relationship?" Rachel's face closed off immediately, the vulnerability disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. "I didn't keep Luke from anything. He made his own choices. After you convinced him I was interfering, you were interfering. You called constantly. You expected him to drop everything for your birthday dinners and Sunday brunches. You couldn't accept that he had his own life now. I was trying to maintain a relationship with my son. You were trying to keep him as your little boy, always checking up on him, offering advice he didn't ask for, wanting to be involved in every decision we made." She leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe Luke wanted some distance, that maybe he was tired of being treated like a child who couldn't function without his mommy's approval?" Each word was like a knife, precisely aimed to cause maximum pain. And the worst part was, I couldn't be sure she was entirely wrong. Had I been too involved? Had I unintentionally made Luke feel smothered? "I only wanted what was best for him," I said softly. "And you assumed you knew what that was better than he did." Rachel stood up, gathering her things. "This conversation is pointless. You'll never see your own behavior clearly. But it doesn't matter now. We're here, and we're going to make this work for all of us." She walked out of the room, leaving me with more questions than answers. I'd glimpsed something real beneath Rachel's carefully constructed facade, a wounded child who had grown into a defensive, controlling woman. But that glimpse of vulnerability didn't change the fact that she was still planning to take everything I had. If anything, it made her more dangerous. Because her actions weren't just about greed or convenience. They were driven by something deeper, more desperate, a lifetime of insecurity and a determination to never be vulnerable again, no matter who she had to hurt in the process. Later that night, I was putting away some laundry when I noticed something tucked between the dresser and the wall in the guest room, a worn leather notebook. Curious, I pulled it out and opened it. The first page had Rachel Winters written in careful script, with a date from 15 years ago, a diary. I hesitated, knowing I should respect her privacy, but then I remembered the folder of legal documents aimed at taking away my autonomy, and my hesitation vanished. I began to read. The entries dated back to Rachel's college years. They painted a picture of a young woman determined to reinvent herself, to escape the poverty and chaos of her childhood. There were meticulous notes about how to dress, how to speak, how to act in different social situations, lists of goals, with items checked off one by one: graduate with honors, land internship at prestigious firm, buy first designer handbag, date someone from a good family. It was like reading the instruction manual for building a new identity. Rachel had studied success the way other people studied academic subjects, methodically breaking down what separated the haves from the have-nots, and then recreating herself accordingly. And then, about halfway through, I found the entry about meeting Luke. Met Elle today at the Henderson reception. Family money, good education, kind but easily influenced. Mama would say I hit the jackpot. He's exactly what I've been looking for: someone stable, from a good background, who can give me the security I've never had. His mother seems over-involved. Could be a problem later. But Elle seems eager to please. And I'm good at managing people. This could be it. My chance for the life I deserve. I felt sick reading it. Luke hadn't been a person to her, he'd been a means to an end. A ticket to the stable, secure life she'd never had. I flipped forward, scanning through the entries until I found one from around the time they got engaged. Elle, proposed today. Ring is smaller than I'd hoped, but I can upgrade later when we're more established. His mother cried when he told her. I'm sure she thinks she's losing her baby. She has no idea. Once we're married, I can start creating some distance. Elle doesn't see how she manipulates him with all that motherly concern, but I see it, and I know how to counter it. By this time next year, I'll be his primary influence, as it should be. It was all there in black and white, Rachel's deliberate, calculated plan to isolate Luke from me. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because my very existence as a loving parent was a threat to her total control over him. I read on, finding entries that corresponded with key moments in our estrangement, the strategic emergencies that prevented them from attending family events, the careful reframing of my attempts to stay connected as interfering and boundary violations, the gradual construction of a narrative where I was possessive and unstable rather than simply loving and concerned. The final entry about me was dated shortly after our last phone call, when Rachel had told me I needed therapy for my attachment issues. Finally cut ties with C today. Should have done it sooner, but needed to make sure Elle was firmly on my side first. He felt guilty. Of course, that's his weakness, always feeling responsible for other people's feelings. But I reminded him how manipulative she's been, how she can't respect our marriage, how she's constantly trying to come between us. He sees it now, understands that sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Without her constant neediness and drama, we can finally build the life we deserve. Elle will thank me for this, eventually. I closed the diary, feeling a strange mixture of rage and vindication. All these years, I'd wondered if I really had been too clingy, too involved, too needy, if perhaps I'd driven Luke away with my own behavior. But here was the truth. In Rachel's own handwriting, I hadn't lost my son because I'd been a bad mother. I'd lost him because Rachel had methodically poisoned our relationship to serve her own needs. But the entries also confirmed something else, how deeply insecure Rachel truly was beneath her confident exterior. Every page vibrated with fear of poverty, fear of abandonment, fear of returning to the chaotic, unstable life of her childhood. Her controlling behavior, her materialism, her manipulation of Luke, it all stemmed from that core of fear. Understanding Rachel better didn't make me hate her any less for what she'd done to my relationship with Luke, but it did make me realize that her current scheme wasn't just about greed. It was about security. The house, the money, these represented safety to her, and she would do anything to secure them. I carefully returned the diary to its hiding place, my mind racing. Rachel was more desperate and determined than I'd realized, and that made her even more dangerous. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hushed, urgent voices coming from the guest bedroom. I moved quietly to the wall we shared and listened. "Don't understand why we need to rush this," Luke was saying, his voice tense. "She's not going anywhere." "You heard what Victor said," Rachel replied. "If we don't settle this debt by the end of the month, there will be consequences. These aren't people who give extensions, Luke. But trying to get guardianship, it seems extreme. She's my mother, for God's sake. And she has assets we need. Would you rather I go back to Victor empty-handed? Tell him sorry. We can't pay the $80,000 we owe because Luke's too sentimental about his mommy." $80,000. My mind reeled. What had they gotten themselves into? "There has to be another way," Luke insisted. "Maybe we could just ask her for a loan." Rachel's laugh was sharp and dismissive. After 6 years of no contact, she'd never agree. Besides, we need more than a loan. We need enough to pay off Victor and set ourselves up somewhere new, somewhere they can't find us. So we're just going to take everything she has and leave her with nothing. How is that any better than what Victor's threatening to do to us? Don't be dramatic. She'll be fine. The court will appoint someone to manage her affairs. Make sure she has what she needs. And we'll be free. Isn't that what matters? Our safety. Our future. There was a long pause. "I don't know if I can do this to her," Luke said finally, his voice barely audible through the wall. "You don't have a choice." Rachel's tone was cold now. "If you back out, I'm going to Victor alone. I'll tell him you're the one who lost the money. You're the one who can't pay it back. How long do you think you'll last once he decides you're the weak link?" "Are you threatening me?" Luke sounded shocked. "I'm being realistic. We're in this together. Luke, either we both get out, or neither of us does. And if you think your mother would want you beaten or killed over money, then maybe you don't know her as well as you think." Another silence. Longer this time. "Fine," Luke said at last, defeat heavy in his voice. "But we do this my way. No rushing, no forcing her. We convince her to sign willingly, if she won't. We drop it and figure something else out." "We don't have time for your gentle approach. The hearing is already scheduled for Monday." "What without even talking to her first?" "Of course without talking to her, that's the whole point. It's an emergency petition. If she knows about it beforehand, she could fight it." "Jesus, Rachel, this is insane. This is survival. Now pull yourself together. She's probably awake by now. And we need to keep establishing that pattern of confusion. Remember to act concerned when she forgets things, or gets confused about where she put something. Document everything. Monday's hearing is just preliminary, but every bit of evidence helps." I backed away from the wall, my heart pounding. Monday. They had a court hearing scheduled for Monday, just 4 days away. A hearing that could potentially strip me of my legal rights, my autonomy, my ability to control my own life and property. And what was this about a debt $80,000 owed to someone named Victor, someone who made threats, someone they were afraid of? This wasn't just about Rachel's desire for security anymore. This was about something far more dangerous. I needed to act, and I needed to act now. But I had to be careful. If they realized I knew about their plans, they might accelerate their timeline or find some other way to prevent me from protecting myself. I went to the kitchen and deliberately made noise preparing coffee, giving them time to end their conversation before I appeared to be awake. A few minutes later, Rachel emerged from the bedroom. all smiles and cheer as if she hadn't just been discussing how to legally strip me of my rights. "Good morning, Caroline. Did you sleep well?" "Fine, thank you," I say, keeping my voice neutral. "I was thinking we could go shopping today. This kitchen could use some new appliances. Don't you think that coffee maker looks like it's from the 1990s? I like my coffee maker. It works perfectly well." Rachel exchanged a glance with Luke, who had followed her into the kitchen. "See what I mean?" she said to him. "So resistant to change. It's like this with everything." "Mom," Luke said gently, "Rachel's just trying to help make things nice for all of us, since we're going to be living here." "Are you?" I asked, looking directly at him. "For how long?" "Exactly." "You never mentioned that part of your plan." Luke shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we haven't really decided yet. It depends on a lot of factors." "Like what?" "Like job opportunities and, how things work out here." "How things work out?" I repeated. "I see." Rachel stepped in smoothly. "What Luke means is that we're taking it one day at a time, but we're committed to being here for you, Caroline. For as long as you need us. For as long as it takes to get control of my assets." She meant, "That's very thoughtful," I said, forcing a smile. "But I've been managing on my own for quite some time now. I'm not sure I need as much help as you think." "Everyone needs help sometimes," Rachel said, her tone patronizing. "Especially at your age. You shouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house all alone." "I'm not worried." "Well, you should be," she said, a slight edge creeping into her voice. "Coastal properties require constant upkeep. The salt air corrodes everything, and the property taxes in this area are astronomical. Did you know that?" "Eleanor took care of all that in her will," I said calmly. "The taxes are covered by a trust she set up. This was a lie there was no trust, but I wanted to see their reaction. I wasn't disappointed." Rachel's eyes widened slightly, and she shot a quick glance at Luke. "A trust?" Luke asked, trying to sound casual. "She never mentioned that." "It was part of her estate planning. Very sensible of her. Really, everything's taken care of." "Everything," Rachel pressed. "What exactly does this trust cover? The house, the taxes, maintenance, even my living expenses to some extent?" I took a sip of my coffee, watching them over the rim of my cup. "Why do you ask? Just curious," Rachel said quickly. "It's good to know these things are handled, though trusts can be so complicated. Are you sure you understand all the details?" "Eleanor's lawyer explained everything. William Harper. Do you know him? He's been handling Eleanor's affairs for decades. Very thorough man." Another lie. There was no William Harper. But I wanted to plant the idea that there was a knowledgeable professional already involved with my financial affairs, someone who would notice if things suddenly changed. "I see," Rachel said, her smile tight now. "Well, that's good to know." She excused herself a moment later, saying she needed to make a phone call. Luke lingered in the kitchen, looking uneasy. "Mom," he started, then stopped. "I just want you to know that we—" "Yes," I prompted when he didn't continue. He shook his head. "Nothing. I'm glad you have all that sorted out with Eleanor's estate. It must be a relief." "It is," I agreed. "Knowing everything's secure, that no one can take it away, it's very reassuring." Luke flinched at that, and for a moment, I thought he might confess everything, but then Rachel called him from the other room, and the moment was gone. As he left, I allowed myself a small smile. I'd bought myself some time with my improvised story about the trust. They would need to regroup, to figure out if what I'd said was true and how it affected their plans. But time was the one thing I needed most right now. Time to find help, to protect myself and my assets before Monday's hearing. I waited until they were both in the shower before I made my move, taking my cell phone and car keys. I slipped out the front door and walked quickly to my car. As I drove away from my own house, heart pounding with the fear of being caught, I had only one thought: I might have lost my son years ago. But I would be damned if I'd let them take my freedom too. My first stop was the bank, not my regular branch, where Rachel might think to look for me, but one in the next town over. I asked to speak with a manager privately, and was shown to a small office where a woman in her 50s introduced herself as Patricia Dawson. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Foster?" she asked, gesturing for me to sit. I took a deep breath and decided to be completely honest. "I believe my son and daughter-in-law are planning to have me declared mentally incompetent in order to gain control of my assets. I need to protect myself, and I need to do it quickly." To her credit, Patricia didn't look shocked or skeptical. Instead, she nodded gravely. "Unfortunately, this is something we see more often than you might think. Can you tell me what led you to this conclusion?" I explained everything: the sudden appearance at my door, the documents I'd found, the conversation I'd overheard about the court hearing scheduled for Monday. As I spoke, Patricia took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Foster, I believe you, and I want to help. What you're describing is financial elder abuse, and it's a serious crime. There are several steps we can take immediately to protect your accounts." For the next hour, Patricia walked me through a series of protective measures. We placed alerts on all my accounts that would flag any unusual activity. We changed all my passwords and security questions. We set up a new account at this branch that Luke and Rachel wouldn't know about, and I transferred a substantial portion of my savings into it. "This won't stop a court order if they do succeed in getting guardianship," Patricia warned me. "But it will buy you time and make it harder for them to access your money without proper legal scrutiny." "What about the house?" I asked. "That's what they really want. Real estate is outside my expertise, but I'd recommend speaking with an attorney immediately. Given the timeline you've described, you need legal representation before Monday." "I don't know any attorneys in this area," I admitted. "I've only lived here since Eleanor passed." Patricia thought for a moment, then wrote a name and number on a business card. "Gabriela Santos. She specializes in elder law and estate planning. She's tough, ethical, and she doesn't mess around. If anyone can help you on short notice, it's her." I took the card gratefully. "Thank you for believing me. I was afraid you'd think I was just a confused old lady being paranoid about her family." Patricia's expression softened. "Mrs. Foster, I've worked in banking for 30 years. In that time, I've learned that when an older client comes in worried about family members trying to access their money, they're usually right to be concerned. Financial exploitation of seniors is a real problem, and it often comes from the people you'd least expect." As I left the bank, I felt a small sense of victory. My money was safer now, at least temporarily, but I still had so much to do, and the clock was ticking. I called Gabriela Santos from my car and was surprised when she answered directly. "Santos Legal, this is Gabriela. My name is Caroline Foster. Patricia Dawson at First National gave me your number. I need help protecting myself and my assets from my son and daughter-in-law. They have a court hearing scheduled for Monday to try to get guardianship over me." "Monday?" Her voice sharpened. "That's an emergency petition. Are you free right now?" "Yes." "Come to my office immediately. We don't have much time." Gabriela's office was in a converted Victorian house in the center of town. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that was instantly reassuring. She listened intently as I repeated my story, taking rapid notes on a legal pad. Unlike Patricia, she did look shocked at certain points, particularly when I mentioned the text messages about establishing a pattern of confusion. "That's premeditated fraud," she said, underlining something on her pad. "And the fact that they've already scheduled a hearing without notifying you is extremely concerning. Usually, the court requires notice to the proposed ward that's you unless there are extraordinary circumstances." "What kind of circumstances? Immediate danger to your health or welfare, or risk of substantial financial harm if action isn't taken immediately?" She frowned. They must have convinced the court that one of those conditions exists. But that's not true. I'm perfectly fine, and my finances are in order. I believe you, Mrs. Foster, but we need to prove it to the court. She tapped her pen against the pad. First things first, we need to file an emergency motion to postpone Monday's hearing and give us time to prepare a proper response. Then we need to get you evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist to establish your mental competence. A psychiatrist, is that really necessary? If they're claiming you're mentally incompetent, we need an expert opinion stating otherwise. It's the most direct way to counter their petition. I nodded, seeing the logic. What else? We need to document everything that's happened since they arrived. The changes they've made to your home, the comments about your age and mental state, the suggestion that you add them to your deed, all of it. And if possible, we need to get evidence of their true intentions. I have the texts I saw on Rachel's phone, I said. Gabriella shook her head. Unless you have screenshots, that's just hearsay. We need something more concrete. I thought about it. What if I recorded their conversations? They talk about their plans when they think I'm not listening. That's tricky. The legality of recording someone without their knowledge varies by state. In some places, it's perfectly legal as long as one party to the conversation consents. That would be you. In others, you need everyone's consent. And here, this is a one-party consent state, so technically you could record conversations you're part of, but recording conversations you're not participating in could be problematic. She considered for a moment. Let's focus on what we know is legal. Start keeping a detailed journal of everything they say and do. Note the time, date, and exact wording as best you can remember. For the next 2 hours, Gabriella and I worked on preparing my defense. She drafted emergency motions to file with the court. I provided every detail I could remember about Luke and Rachel's behavior. She made calls to schedule an emergency psychological evaluation for me the following day. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon, and I knew Luke and Rachel would be wondering where I was. What do I tell them? I asked. They'll want to know where I've been all day. Tell them you needed some time alone to think about their suggestion of adding them to the deed. Say you went for a drive to clear your head. Gabriella handed me a business card. My cell number is on the back. Call me anytime, day or night, if you feel you're in danger or if they try to force you to sign anything. Do you think they might? Her expression was grim. Based on what you've told me, they're desperate and operating on a tight timeline. Desperate people do desperate things. Be careful. Mrs. Foster. As I drove home, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. I was afraid of what Luke and Rachel might do when their plans started to unravel, but I was also determined not to be their victim. Eleanor had left me this house so I would have a safe place, a sanctuary that was truly mine. I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me, not even my own son. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street, a sleek black sedan that screamed expensive. As I got out of my car, the front door opened, and Rachel hurried out, looking surprisingly nervous. Caroline, thank goodness you're back. We were getting worried. I needed some time to think, I said, sticking to the story Gabriella had suggested. I went for a drive along the coast. Well, you should have left a note or something. Luke was about to call the police. I doubted that very much. The last thing they would want was police involvement. Who's visiting? I asked, nodding toward the sedan. Oh, that's just a friend of ours, Dr. Morgan. He stopped by to say hello since we're new in town. A doctor. The mental competency evaluation they'd mentioned in their documents. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. How nice, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'd love to meet him. Rachel's smile tightened. Actually, he was just leaving, but I'm sure you'll meet him another time. No rush, I said, he said, walking past her into the house. In the living room, Luke was showing a well-dressed man in his 60s to the door. The man carried a leather briefcase and had the polished, professional air of someone accustomed to authority. Mom, Luke said, looking startled. You're back? I am. I smiled at the stranger. I'm Caroline Foster. This is my home. The man hesitated, glancing at Luke, who gave a slight nod. Dr. James Morgan, he said, extending his hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Foster. I shook his hand firmly, meeting his evaluating gaze with a steady one of my own. Are you new to the area? Dr. Morgan Rachel mentioned you're a friend. Another glance at Luke. Not exactly new. No. I've had a practice here for about 15 years. What kind of practice? I'm a geriatric psychiatrist. How interesting. And you just happened to stop by to welcome Luke and Rachel. Morgan looked increasingly uncomfortable. I should really be going. Luke, Rachel, we'll continue our conversation another time. As he hurried out, I turned to face my son and his wife. A geriatric psychiatrist just happened to drop by for a social call. How unusual. He's an old friend, Rachel said quickly. We knew him back in Phoenix. From Phoenix to here. What a coincidence. I kept my tone light, but I could see the panic growing in both their faces. And what were you discussing with this old friend? Nothing important, Luke mumbled. Just catching up. I see. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Then I turned back to them. I've been thinking about your suggestion, Luke, about adding your names to the deed. Rachel's eyes lit up with poorly concealed eagerness. And I've decided against it. The light in her eyes died. What, why? Because this is my home. Eleanor left it to me, not to us, and while you're welcome to visit, I'm not interested in sharing ownership. But Mom, Luke started, we've talked about this. The maintenance, the expenses, are all manageable within my budget, I finished for him. And as I mentioned, Eleanor's trust covers most of it anyway. About that trust, Rachel said, her voice tight. We called Eleanor's lawyer today. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced. Did you? Yes. Strangely, he'd never heard of a William Harper. In fact, he said there is no trust. Eleanor left you the house outright, with no provisions for maintenance or taxes. They'd called my bluff. I hadn't expected them to check so quickly, but I refused to back down. How odd. Perhaps you spoke to the wrong person. Eleanor had several lawyers handling different aspects of her estate. Or perhaps you're confused, Rachel suggested, her voice dripping with false concern. Mixing up details, inventing things that don't exist. That happens sometimes, especially after a traumatic loss like losing your sister. And there it was, the beginning of their pattern of confusion narrative. The groundwork for declaring me mentally incompetent. I'm not confused, Rachel. I know exactly what Eleanor intended, and exactly what I intend. And I intend to keep this house in my name only. Rachel's mask of concern slipped, revealing the anger beneath. You're making a mistake, Caroline, a big one. The only mistake I made was opening my door to you after 6 years of silence. Luke stepped forward, his expression pained. Mom, please, we're trying to help you. Luke, are you really? I looked directly into his eyes, searching for any trace of the son I'd raised. Or are you helping yourselves to what's mine because you're in trouble and need money? His face went pale. What are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or should I say, who I'm talking about? Someone named Victor. Perhaps the color drained completely from Luke's face. And beside him, Rachel went very still. How do you? He began. It doesn't matter how I know. I cut him off. What matters is that I do know. I know everything. Your plans for Monday's hearing, your hopes of having me declared incompetent, your scheme to take control of my assets to pay off your debts. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was our breathing mind steady, theirs increasingly rapid. Then Rachel laughed, the sound brittle and false. I don't know what you think you've discovered, Caroline, but you're clearly confused. There's no hearing, no scheme. You're paranoid and delusional, which frankly only proves our point about your mental state. I smiled at her, refusing to be baited. We'll see who's delusional on Monday, won't we? When I show up at the courthouse with my lawyer. The shock on their faces was almost worth everything I'd been through. Almost. You're bluffing, Rachel whispered. Am I? I walked to the door and opened it. I think it's time for you both to leave my house. Now. Luke looked at me with something like desperation. Mom, please, you don't understand. We're in trouble. Serious trouble. Then you should have come to me honestly and asked for help, instead of trying to steal everything I own. Now get out. We have nowhere to go, Rachel said, her voice hard. We gave up our apartment. That sounds like a personal problem, not a legal one, I replied, echoing her own cold tone. You have until morning to find alternative arrangements. After that, I'll have you removed as trespassers. As I stood there, holding the door open, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I was taking back control of my life. I was standing up for myself, protecting what was mine. And even though it broke my heart to see what Luke had become, I knew I was doing the right thing, because sometimes the strongest act of love is refusing to be someone's victim, even when that someone is your own child. The night after I confronted Luke and Rachel was one of the longest of my life. I locked my bedroom door and pushed a dresser in front of it, not trusting what they might do now that their plans were exposed. Through the walls, I could hear them arguing in fierce whispers, their voices occasionally rising before being quickly hushed. I barely slept, jerking awake at every creak and footstep. By dawn, I was exhausted but resolute. I had given them until morning to leave, and I intended to hold firm to that deadline. As the first light filtered through my curtains, I dressed quickly and gathered the few things I would need for the day: my purse, phone, the business card Gabriella had given me, and a small overnight bag I'd packed just in case. If they refused to leave, I would be the one to go, at least temporarily. I wasn't going to put myself in danger by remaining in the house with two desperate people who had already proven they would do anything for money. When I finally emerged from my bedroom, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I moved cautiously through the hallway, checking each room as I passed. The guest bedroom door stood open, the bed neatly made as if no one had slept there. The bathroom was empty, towels hung with military precision. In the living room, all traces of Rachel's redecorating had vanished. My furniture was back in its original positions, my photo albums returned to their shelves, my grandmother's rocking chair restored to its place by the window. A chill ran down my spine. They hadn't simply obeyed my demand to leave. No, this was something else, something carefully calculated. I hurried to the kitchen and looked out the window to the driveway. My car was still there, but theirs was gone. So was the moving truck that had been parked on the street. On the kitchen counter sat a single sheet of paper, folded in half with my name written on it in Luke's handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Mom, you've made your position clear, and we respect your decision. We found other arrangements as you requested. I'm sorry things ended this way. Despite what you believe, we do care about you. I hope someday you'll understand that we were only trying to help." Luke, no mention of the guardianship hearing, no acknowledgement of their scheme to take my house and money. Just the same gaslighting narrative they'd been pushing all along, that they were the caring ones, and I was the unreasonable one who couldn't see how much they wanted to help me. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then picked up my phone to call Gabriella. She answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. "Mrs. Foster, is everything all right?" "They're gone," I said. "They left sometime during the night, took all their things, made it look like they were never here. Luke left a note claiming they respect my decision and have found other arrangements." "That's unexpected," Gabriella said, and I could hear the concern in her voice. People who go to the trouble of filing for emergency guardianship don't typically just walk away when confronted. "I don't think they've walked away at all," I said. "I think they're regrouping, coming up with a new strategy. The hearing is still scheduled for Monday, isn't it?" "Yes, as far as I know. I filed our emergency motion to postpone last night, but we haven't heard back from the court yet." "Then we need to proceed as planned. I can't take any chances." "I agree. Your psychiatric evaluation is scheduled for 10 a.m. with Dr. Levine. She's one of the most respected geriatric psychiatrists in the state, and she's cleared her schedule to see you as an emergency. After that, we should go to the bank in person to make sure all your protective measures are in place." "I'll be there," I promised. "And Gabriella, thank you for believing me." "Mrs. Foster, in my line of work, I've seen enough genuine cases of cognitive decline to recognize when someone is being manipulated and gaslit. You're one of the most clear-headed clients I've ever had. After hanging up, I did a thorough check of the house, making sure Luke and Rachel hadn't left any unpleasant surprises behind. To my relief, everything seemed to be in order. They'd even returned the personal documents Rachel had been organizing from my desk. But as I sorted through the papers, making sure nothing was missing, I noticed something odd. My checkbook was there, but the last few checks had been torn out. Checks I was certain I hadn't used. With growing alarm, I called my bank. "This is Caroline Foster," I said when the customer service representative answered. "I need to check if any checks have been cashed from my account in the last few days." After verifying my identity, the representative checked my account. "Yes, Mrs. Foster, 3 checks were processed yesterday. One for $5,000, one for $7,500, and one for $9,000. My blood ran cold. "Those aren't mine. I didn't write those checks. I'm showing they were made out to Luke Foster and appear to have your signature." "My signature was forged," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I need to report this as fraud immediately." The representative transferred me to the fraud department, where I spent the next 30 minutes filing a formal complaint. They promised to investigate, but warned me that because Luke was my son, it might be complicated to prove the checks were unauthorized. "Family fraud is unfortunately common," the fraud specialist told me, "and often difficult to prosecute. Do you have any evidence that you didn't authorize these checks? Would the fact that my son and his wife were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent count as evidence?" I asked bitterly. "That would certainly be relevant. Yes. Do you have documentation of that?" "My lawyer does. We filed an emergency motion to stop a guardianship hearing they scheduled without my knowledge." "I see." The specialist's tone changed, becoming more serious. "Mrs. Foster, I'm going to escalate this case to our elder fraud unit. They specialize in situations like yours. In the meantime, we'll place a freeze on your account to prevent any additional checks from being processed." By the time I finished dealing with the bank, it was nearly 9:30. I needed to hurry to make my appointment with Dr. Levine. As I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Caroline Foster." The voice was male, deep, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Victor Mercer. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in your son and his wife." The name sent a jolt of fear through me. Victor, the man Luke and Rachel owed money to. The man they were afraid of. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a friendly conversation. I understand you recently came into some property. Beachfront. Very valuable. And your son, unfortunately, has some outstanding obligations to me." "That has nothing to do with me," he chuckled, a sound entirely devoid of humor. "On the contrary, Mrs. Foster, family connections make it very much your concern. Luke and Rachel assured me they could satisfy their debt with your help. I was quite disappointed to learn they've been unsuccessful." "I'm not responsible for my son's debts," I said firmly. "Whatever arrangement he had with you is between the two of you. Normally, I would agree. However, this situation has become complicated. You see, I extended additional credit based on their assurances about your assets. Now I find myself in an awkward position. Are you threatening me, Mr. Mercer?" Another chuckle. "Threatening, no. I'm simply explaining the situation. Your son and his wife owe me a considerable sum. They've attempted to secure that sum from you and failed. Now they've disappeared, leaving me with no way to recoup my investment." "That sounds like a poor business decision on your part." There was a pause, then, "You're quite direct. Mrs. Foster, I appreciate that. So I'll be direct as well. I want my money. Your son can't or won't pay me. That leaves you—" "I'm not giving you a penny. I had a feeling you might say that, which is why I took the liberty of placing a lien against your property this morning." "What?" I gasped. "You can't do that." "I think you'll find that I can. Your son signed a personal guarantee using your property as collateral. I have the documentation right here. His signature. And what appears to be yours. Properly notarized." "That's impossible. I never signed anything." "The courts may disagree. The papers appear to be in order. At the very least, it will take months, perhaps years, to sort out. During which time, you won't be able to sell or refinance your property." My mind raced. This had to be what Luke and Rachel had been planning all along. Not just taking control of my assets through guardianship, but using them to pay off this man. And when I confronted them, they moved to Plan B, forging my signature on documents giving Victor a claim to my house. "This is fraud," I said. I'll fight it. Of course you will, Victor agreed smoothly. And perhaps eventually you'll win, but legal battles are expensive and time-consuming. Wouldn't it be simpler to just pay what's owed, a small price for peace of mind? How much? I asked, though I had no intention of paying. The original debt was $80,000, with interest and certain penalties for late payment. It's now approximately $120,000. That's extortion. That's business. Mrs. Foster, I lend money. I expect to be repaid with interest. Your son understood the terms. I'll talk to my lawyer, I said. Don't call me again. As you wish. But Mrs. Foster, the clock is ticking. Every day that passes, the amount grows. I'd advise you not to wait too long. He hung up, leaving me shaking with rage and fear. I immediately called Gabriella and explained what had happened. A lien, she repeated, sounding alarmed. That's serious. If he's actually filed one, it could cloud your title and make it difficult to sell or refinance the property. Can he really do that based on forged documents? Not legally, no, but it could take time to prove the forgery. In the meantime, the lien would remain in place. She paused. Mrs. Foster, I think you should come to my office immediately. This changes things. We're not just dealing with a family dispute anymore. If this Victor person is who I think he is, we're talking about organized crime. Organized crime? I echoed faintly. There's a Victor Mercer who operates in this region, primarily in high-interest loans to desperate people. He's been investigated several times but never successfully prosecuted. He's careful, connected, and extremely dangerous. What should I do? First, come see me. Then we need to talk to the police. Forgery, fraud, and elder abuse are serious crimes. And if Luke and Rachel are involved with Mercer, they may be in danger as well. After what they tried to do to me, I'm not sure I care, I said bitterly. I understand, but right now, we need to focus on protecting you and your property. Everything else is secondary. I agreed to meet her at her office after my appointment with Dr. Levine. As I drove to the psychiatrist's office, my mind whirled with the implications of Victor's call. The situation was far more dangerous than I'd realized. This wasn't just about Luke and Rachel's greed anymore. This was about serious criminals with real power to hurt me. Dr. Levine turned out to be a petite woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She spent 2 hours conducting a thorough evaluation of my cognitive functions, asking questions about my memory, my decision-making abilities, my understanding of financial matters, and my awareness of my current situation. Mrs. Foster, she said when we'd finished, I've been doing these evaluations for over 30 years. Based on our session today, I can state with absolute confidence that you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning abilities are intact, and your judgment appears sound. So I'm not crazy for thinking my son and daughter-in-law were trying to take advantage of me. She smiled grimly. Not at all. In fact, your account of events demonstrates a clear understanding of the manipulation tactics often used in elder abuse situations. You recognized the red flags, sought appropriate help, and took steps to protect yourself. Those are the actions of a mentally competent individual. Will you put that in writing for the court? I already have. She handed me a sealed envelope. My full evaluation and findings. I've also made myself available to testify at Monday's hearing if necessary. Relief washed over me. At least now I had expert testimony to counter Luke and Rachel's claims about my mental state. From Dr. Levine's office, I drove straight to Gabriella's. She was waiting for me, along with a stern-looking man she introduced as Detective James Harris from the Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Foster, he said, shaking my hand. Ms. Santos has briefed me on your situation. I understand you believe your son and his wife have committed forgery and fraud against you. I know they have, I corrected. They stole checks from my checkbook and cashed them without my authorization, and apparently they forged my signature on documents giving a man named Victor Mercer a claim to my house. Detective Harris nodded. We're familiar with Mercer. He operates in a gray area of the law, predatory but careful to maintain a veneer of legitimacy. If he's involved, this is more serious than a simple family dispute. That's what I said, Gabriella agreed. Mrs. Foster needs protection, both legal and physical. Physical, I repeated. You think I'm in danger? Detective Harris's expression was grim. Mercer doesn't typically resort to violence directly. He has others for that. But yes, if he believes you're standing between him and a significant amount of money, there could be risk. So what do? First, we document everything, Harris said. The unauthorized checks, the forged documents, the guardianship petition, all of it. Then we file criminal charges against your son and his wife for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. Criminal charges. Despite everything, the thought of Luke being arrested made my heart ache. Is that really necessary, Mrs. Foster? Harris said gently. What they've done is not just wrong, it's criminal. And if we don't stop them now, they'll likely try again, either with you or someone else. I knew he was right, but it didn't make the decision any easier. This was my son we were talking about, the little boy I'd raised, the young man I'd been so proud of. How had we come to this? What about the lien? Gabriella asked. How do we remove that? We'll need to file an emergency petition with the court, claiming the documents are fraudulent, Harris explained. That will temporarily suspend the lien until a hearing can be held, but we'll need evidence of the forgery. I have samples of Mrs. Foster's genuine signature, Gabriella said, and we can arrange for a handwriting analysis. Good. And Mrs. Foster, for your safety, I'd recommend staying somewhere other than your home for a few days. A hotel, perhaps, or with a friend. I don't really have friends in this area, I admitted. I've only lived here since Eleanor died. There's a secure residential hotel near my office, Gabriella suggested. Many of my clients stay there during difficult legal proceedings. It has good security and is comfortable enough for a short stay. I nodded, accepting the inevitable. All right, I'll pack a bag. I'll send an officer with you, Harris said, just as a precaution. As we finalized the arrangements, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and determination. I was about to file criminal charges against my own son. I was being forced from my home by threats from a loan shark. My life had been turned upside down in the span of a few days. But beneath the turmoil, I felt something else, a steely resolve that I hadn't known I possessed. I would not be a victim. I would fight for what was mine. And when this was over, I would rebuild my life on my own terms, without the shadow of Luke and Rachel's betrayal hanging over me. The residential hotel Gabriella recommended was pleasant enough, a converted mansion with spacious rooms, good security, and a quiet atmosphere. The staff was discreet, asking no questions when I checked in under an assumed name, accompanied by a plainclothes police officer. We'll have a patrol car drive by regularly, Officer Martinez told me as she helped me settle in. And Detective Harris asked me to give you this. She handed me a small device that looked like a key fob. It's a panic button. Press it if you feel threatened or see anything suspicious. It connects directly to the precinct. Do you really think that's necessary? I asked, eyeing the device uneasily. Better safe than sorry, ma'am. People like Mercer don't like loose ends, and right now, you're a loose end. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past few days was fading, leaving me drained and heartsick. I thought about calling an old friend from back home, someone who knew Luke when he was growing up, someone who might understand my conflicted feelings. But what would I say? That my son had tried to have me declared incompetent, that he'd forged my signature and stolen my checks. The truth was too painful, too humiliating to share. Instead, I called Gabriella to check on the progress of our legal maneuvers. The emergency petition to suspend the lien has been filed, she told me. The judge has scheduled a hearing for next Thursday. In the meantime, the lien is temporarily suspended. And the guardianship hearing, still scheduled for Monday, but I'm confident we can get it dismissed. Dr. Levine's evaluation is compelling evidence of your competence, and the fact that Luke and Rachel attempted fraud against you only strengthens our case. Have the police found them? There was a slight hesitation before she answered. Not yet. They seem to have left town. Running from Victor Mercer, most likely, I said. I can't blame them for that, at least. Mrs. Foster, Gabriella said carefully. I know this is difficult. Luke is your son, and despite everything, you still care about him. But right now, We need to focus on protecting you and your assets. Everything else can be dealt with later." "I know," I sighed. "It's just hard to reconcile the son I raised with the man who would do this to me." "People change," she said softly. "Sometimes in ways we never could have predicted." After hanging up, I tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luke's face not as the man who had betrayed me, but as the little boy who used to crawl into my lap for bedtime stories, the teenager who brought me wildflowers on Mother's Day, the young man who had once been so proud to introduce me to his college friends. Where had that Luke gone? How had Rachel managed to twist him so completely that he would participate in a scheme to rob his own mother? Or had the seeds of this betrayal always been there, waiting for the right circumstances to grow? The questions haunted me through the night, leaving me restless and unsettled. By morning, I felt hollowed out, empty of everything except a dull, persistent ache where my love for my son used to be. Gabriella called early, her voice tense. "Mrs. Foster, there's been a development. The police went to serve the criminal complaint at Luke and Rachel's last known address in Phoenix. Their landlord said they left owing 3 months' rent, but he also mentioned something else. They have a daughter, Olivia, 15 years old." "A daughter," I repeated, stunned. "Luke has a child." "Yes, according to the landlord, she lives primarily with them, though she sometimes stays with friends when they're having difficulties." "I have a granddaughter," I whispered, trying to process this revelation. "A granddaughter I've never met, that they kept from me for 15 years. It appears so. Detective Harris is trying to locate her now. If Luke and Rachel have fled, they may have left her behind." The thought of my unknown granddaughter, possibly abandoned by her parents as they ran from their debts, filled me with a new kind of pain. Whatever Luke and Rachel had done, their daughter was innocent. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. "We need to find her," I said firmly. "Make sure she's safe. The police are working on it. In the meantime, we need to prepare for Monday's hearing. I'd like you to come to my office this afternoon to go over your testimony." The next few days passed in a blur of legal preparations, meetings with Detective Harris, and constant updates on the search for Luke, Rachel, and the granddaughter I'd never known existed. By Monday morning, they still hadn't been found. As Gabriella and I walked into the courthouse for the guardianship hearing, I felt a strange sense of unreality, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with dark wood paneling and uncomfortable-looking benches. We were early, so we took seats near the front, waiting for the judge to appear. "Remember," Gabriella whispered, "let me do most of the talking. When the judge asks you questions, answer clearly and directly. Don't let emotion overtake you. Even if Luke and Rachel show up and try to provoke you." I nodded, though I doubted Luke and Rachel would appear. They had to know by now that their scheme had been discovered, that criminal charges were pending against them. They would be fools to walk into a courtroom where they could be arrested on sight. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Elena Martinez entered. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she reviewed the file in front of her. "Matter of Caroline Foster," she announced. "Petition for emergency guardianship filed by Luke and Rachel Foster." She looked up, scanning the courtroom. "Are the petitioners present?" There was silence, as expected. Luke and Rachel were nowhere to be seen. "Your Honor," Gabriella stood. "Gabriella Santos, representing Caroline Foster, the proposed ward in this matter. The petitioners are not present, and we move to dismiss this petition immediately on several grounds. Proceed, Ms. Santos." Gabriella outlined our case efficiently, the sudden appearance of Luke and Rachel after 6 years of no contact, their attempts to gain control of my assets, the forged checks and fraudulent lien, and finally, Dr. Levine's evaluation confirming my mental competence. "Furthermore, Your Honor," she concluded, "criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery have been filed against the petitioners. They are currently evading law enforcement. This petition was never about Mrs. Foster's well-being. It was a transparent attempt to gain control of her assets to pay off their own debts." Judge Martinez looked at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Foster, Please rise. I stood, my heart pounding despite my determination to remain calm. Mrs. Foster, this court takes petitions for guardianship very seriously. They are meant to protect vulnerable individuals who can no longer care for themselves or manage their affairs. They are not meant to be used as tools for financial exploitation. She removed her glasses. Having reviewed the evidence presented, including Dr. Levine's evaluation and the police reports, I find no basis whatsoever for this petition. It is hereby dismissed with prejudice. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. Mrs. Foster, I'm also issuing a protective order barring Luke and Rachel Foster from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of your property, and I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible prosecution of the petitioners for abuse of process and attempted financial exploitation of an elder. The DA is already investigating, Your Honor, Gabriella informed her. Criminal charges have been filed. Good. Then we're adjourned. Judge Martinez banged her gavel, and just like that, it was over. As we left the courthouse, Gabriella squeezed my arm. That's one battle won. Now we focus on the lien hearing on Thursday. And finding my granddaughter, I reminded her. Of course. Detective Harris promised to call as soon as they have any news. We had just reached Gabriella's car when my phone rang. Unknown number. With everything that had happened, I almost didn't answer, fearing it might be Victor Mercer again. But something made me press the accept button. Hello. Is this Caroline Foster? The voice was young, female, and uncertain. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Olivia. I think you're my grandmother. My heart skipped a beat. Olivia, Luke's daughter? Yeah, there was a pause. You didn't know about me, did you? No, honey, I didn't. Not until a few days ago. That's what I thought. She sounded sad but not surprised. They told me you didn't want anything to do with us, that you were selfish and didn't care about family. The casual cruelty of that lie took my breath away. That's not true. Olivia, I never even knew you existed. If I had, it's okay. I figured out they were lying a long time ago. They lie about a lot of things. Where are you? Olivia, are you safe? I'm at my friend Zoe's house. Her parents are letting me stay here until someone figures out what to do with me, I guess. Mom and Dad took off 3 days ago. Said they had to take care of something and would be back soon. But they didn't come back. And now there are police looking for them. The police just want to talk to them, I said, not wanting to frighten her with the full truth. And to make sure you're okay. Are you going to take me? Her voice was small, vulnerable. I mean, you're my grandmother. But you don't even know me. I'd like to, I said honestly. I'd like to get to know you, Olivia. But that's a decision we should make together, after we've had a chance to meet. I'd like that too. She sounded relieved. I've always wondered about you. Dad has this old photo album he thinks I don't know about. It has pictures of you and him when he was a kid. You looked nice. Happy. Tears pricked at my eyes. We were happy. Once. Before things got complicated. Yeah, things are pretty complicated now. There was a noise in the background, and she said something away from the phone. Then, Zoe's mom wants to talk to you. Is that okay? Of course. A moment later, an older woman's voice came on the line. Mrs. Foster, I'm Patricia Reynolds. Zoe's mother. Olivia has been staying with us since Friday. Thank you for taking her in, I said. I just learned about her existence a few days ago. Yes, she explained the situation, or at least what she knows of it. Patricia's tone was careful, measured. She's a wonderful girl, Mrs. Foster. Smart, polite, resilient. Whatever issues her parents have, they don't reflect on her. I'm sure they don't. Would it be possible for me to meet her? I think that would be good for both of you. Why don't you come for dinner tonight? It would be a more relaxed setting for a first meeting. We arranged the details, and after I hung up, I turned to Gabriella with a mixture of trepidation and hope. I'm meeting my granddaughter tonight, she smiled. That's wonderful. Mrs. Foster, a bright spot in all this darkness. What if she doesn't like me? What if she believes what Luke and Rachel told her about me? From the sounds of it, she's already figured out her parents aren't the most reliable sources of information. Give her a chance to get to know the real you. The rest will follow naturally. As I drove back to the hotel to rest before the evening's dinner, I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. After years of being cut off from my family, of being told I wasn't wanted or needed, I was about to meet a new family member, one who might be willing to forge a relationship unclouded by Rachel's manipulations. Whatever happened with Luke and Rachel, whatever came of the legal battles still ahead, meeting Olivia represented something precious, a chance to reclaim a piece of the family connection that had been stolen from me, a chance to be a grandmother, to pass on love and wisdom to the next generation. For the first time since Luke and Rachel had appeared on my doorstep, I felt something like hope. The Reynolds home was a modest 2-story in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As I parked at the curb, I checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror. I'd chosen my outfit carefully casual, but neat. Nothing too formal that might make Olivia uncomfortable, but nice enough to show I'd made an effort. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. A moment later, it opened to reveal a smiling woman in her 40s. "Mrs. Foster, I'm Patricia. Please, come in." She led me into a comfortable living room where a tall, slender girl with Luke's dark hair and my own green eyes stood nervously by the fireplace. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked so much like Luke had at that age that it made my heart ache. "Olivia," Patricia said gently. "This is your grandmother, Caroline Foster." "Hi," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Olivia." I resisted the urge to rush forward and hug her. "I'm so glad to meet you." An awkward silence fell, neither of us quite sure what to say next. Patricia came to the rescue. "Dinner's almost ready. Olivia, why don't you show your grandmother the photos you were telling me about?" Olivia nodded and disappeared upstairs, returning a moment later with a small photo album. "These are some pictures I saved," she explained, sitting beside me on the couch. "Dad wanted to throw them out a few years ago, but I hid them." She opened the album to reveal a collection of family photos: Luke as a child, as a teenager, as a young man, and me, much younger, with fewer lines on my face but the same smile. There were birthday parties, Christmases, graduation day. "He looks happy," Olivia said, pointing to a photo of Luke at about 12, grinning widely as he held up a new bicycle. "Was he happy? I mean, I think so," I said softly. "We had our struggles, especially after his father left, but we were close. At least, I thought we were." "What happened? Why did you guys stop talking?" I hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of her parents, but also not willing to lie. "It's complicated, honey. After your dad married your mom, things changed. They wanted space to build their own life, and gradually, we lost touch." "Mom doesn't like to share Dad with anyone," Olivia said matter-of-factly. "She gets jealous, even of me sometimes." The simple observation, delivered without drama or self-pity, spoke volumes about what Olivia's life must have been like. "That must be hard for you," I said carefully. She shrugged. "I'm used to it, and Dad tries to make up for it when she's not around. He's not a bad person, just weak, I guess. He lets Mom make all the decisions, even when he doesn't agree with them." It was a startlingly insightful assessment from someone so young, and it matched exactly what I'd observed in my brief time with Luke and Rachel. "How did you find me?" I asked, curious about how she'd managed to call me. "I saw your number in Dad's phone. He has it listed under Mom, do not call. After they took off and didn't come back, I figured maybe I should call you, see if you knew where they were." "I don't. I'm afraid they left my house rather suddenly, too. Because of the money they owe that guy Victor." I stared at her, surprised. "You know about that?" "I've heard them fighting about it. Mom made some investment that went bad, and they borrowed money from this Victor person to cover it. But then they couldn't pay it back, and he started threatening them." She looked down at her hands. "That's why we moved so much. Every time he got close to finding us, we'd pack up and leave." "That sounds scary." She bit her lip. Do you think they're okay? I mean, I'm mad at them for lying and for leaving me, but I don't want anything bad to happen to them. I hope they're okay, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish them harm. The police are looking for them, but it's mostly to make sure they're safe and to talk about some legal issues. You mean the fraud charges for forging your signature and stealing checks? At my startled look, she smiled ruefully. Zoe's dad is a lawyer. He explained what was happening when the police came to talk to me. Yes, that's part of it. But Olivia, you should know that whatever happens with your parents, it doesn't affect you and me. I'd like us to get to know each other, if you're open to that. I'd like that too, she said softly. I always wanted a grandmother. The other kids at school would talk about visiting their grandparents, getting spoiled with cookies and presents. It seemed nice. It is nice, I assured her. And I have a lot of catching up to do in the grandma department. Patricia called us to dinner then, and the conversation turned to lighter topics: Olivia's interest in art, her favorite subjects in school, her dreams of becoming a marine biologist someday. By the time dessert was served, we were chatting comfortably, the initial awkwardness forgotten, as I was preparing to leave, promising to return the next day. My phone rang. Detective Harris. Mrs. Foster, we've located your son and his wife. Are they all right? They're fine. Currently in custody at the county jail. They were picked up trying to cross the border into Mexico. I see. I wasn't sure how to feel about this news. Relief that they were safe, anger that they'd tried to flee the country rather than face the consequences of their actions, sadness that it had come to this. There's something else you should know, Harris continued. When we arrested them, they had tickets for 3 themselves and Olivia, but they left without her, without making any arrangements for her care. The DA is considering adding child abandonment to the charges. No, I said immediately. No, don't do that. Mrs. Foster, I understand your compassion, but it's not about compassion. It's about Olivia. She's been through enough without having to testify against her parents in court or hear them labeled as child abandoners. Besides, they didn't abandon her. They left her with friends who would take care of her. There was a pause. Then, I'll relay your concerns to the DA, but the other charges still stand. They're being arraigned tomorrow morning. Bail will be set, but given the flight risk, it's likely to be substantial. After hanging up, I turned to find Olivia watching me, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. They caught them, didn't they? I nodded. They're okay, honey. They're in custody, but they're safe. Are they going to jail? I don't know yet. That will be up to the courts. I hesitated, then added, Would you like to see them? I could arrange for a visit, if you want. She thought about it, then shook her head. Not yet. I'm still too angry. Maybe later, when I've had time to think. That's perfectly understandable. And Olivia, whatever happens with your parents, you're not alone. I'm here now. She smiled, a genuine smile that reminded me so much of Luke as a boy that it made my heart ache. I know. That's the one good thing that's come out of all this craziness. I found my grandmother. The next morning, despite my better judgment, I found myself at the county courthouse for Luke and Rachel's arraignment. I sat in the back row, not wanting them to see me, just needing to witness this moment for myself. They looked terrible, exhausted, disheveled, defeated. Rachel's carefully maintained appearance had crumbled, her hair limp, her face bare of makeup. Luke looked even worse, with several days' stubble and dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The charges were read elder abuse, fraud, forgery, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. They pleaded not guilty, as expected. Bail was set at $250,000 each, an amount I knew they couldn't possibly afford. As they were being led back to holding, Luke happened to look up and saw me. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his face recognition. Regret. Shame. Then the guards were escorting him away, and the moment was gone. Gabriella was waiting for me outside the courtroom. Are you all right? She asked gently. No, I admitted. But I will be. The lien hearing is tomorrow, Are you sure you want to go through with it now that Luke and Rachel are in custody? Mercer's claim based on their forged documents is even weaker. I'm sure. I want this over with. I want my house back. Free and clear. And after that? What then? I thought about Olivia, about the tentative connection we'd begun to forge. After that, I start rebuilding. Not the life I had before that's gone, but something new, something better. The next day's hearing about the lien was almost anticlimactic. Victor Mercer didn't even appear, sending a lawyer instead who withdrew the claim when faced with the evidence of forgery and fraud. The judge ordered the lien removed from my property immediately and awarded me costs. As Gabriella and I left the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The immediate threats were over. My house was secure. The future, while uncertain, held possibilities rather than dangers. What will happen to Luke and Rachel? I asked as we walked to her car. That depends on many factors, whether they accept a plea deal, how the evidence holds up, whether the judge feels inclined toward leniency given their situation with Mercer. And Olivia, what happens to her? As her grandmother and closest available relative, you could petition for temporary guardianship while her parents' case is pending. Given the circumstances, it would likely be granted. I think I'd like that, I said. If she wants it too, of course. Gabriella smiled. From what you've told me about your dinner, I think she'd welcome it. Later that afternoon, I met with Olivia again, this time taking her to lunch at a small cafe near the Reynolds home. We talked more openly now, the initial awkwardness gone. The police told me I might be able to stay with you, she said, stirring her milkshake with the straw. While Mom and Dad are dealing with their legal stuff. Only if you want to, I assured her. The Reynolds seem like wonderful people, and if you're comfortable staying with them— No, I want to stay with you, she interrupted. I mean, if that's okay, Zoe and her parents have been great, but they're not my family. You are— The simple declaration brought tears to my eyes. I'd love to have you stay with me, Olivia. We have a lot of catching up to do. Will we live in the beach house, the one Mom and Dad were trying to get? Yes, if you'd like that. It's a beautiful place, right on the water, with a garden your great-aunt Eleanor planted. I think you'll love it. I've never lived near the beach before. Mom always said it was too expensive. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? It's kind of personal, of course. Are you going to help Dad and Mom with bail and lawyers and stuff? It was the question I'd been wrestling with myself. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of them completely after what they'd done. But another part, the part that remembered Luke as a child, that recognized Olivia would be hurt by their punishment, wasn't so sure. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. What they did was wrong. Olivia, very wrong. And there have to be consequences for that. I know, but they're still my parents. And your son. Yes, he is. And nothing can change that. Not even what he's done. I reached across the table and took her hand. Let me think about it. Okay. In the meantime, let's focus on you and me. On building our relationship. She nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. When can I move in? As soon as the court approves the temporary guardianship. Gabriella, my lawyer, thinks that could happen within a week. Cool, and maybe we could visit Dad. I'm still mad at him, but I think I'm ready to see him. Of course we can, whenever you're ready. As we finished our lunch and walked back to the Reynolds house, Olivia slipped her hand into mine, a gesture so natural and trusting that it made my heart swell. In the midst of all the chaos and betrayal, this connection felt like a gift unexpected, precious, and full of promise. I had lost my son to Rachel's manipulation and his own weakness. I had nearly lost my home to their desperation and greed. But I had found a granddaughter I never knew existed, a young woman with Luke's eyes and my determination, untainted by her parents' poor choices. And in finding her, I had found something else as well, a new purpose, a reason to look forward rather than back, a chance to be the kind of grandmother I had always hoped to be, to offer the wisdom, love, and stability that Olivia had never fully known. It wasn't the future I had imagined for myself when Eleanor left me the beach house. It was better. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my beach house, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. The house had been transformed in subtle ways since Olivia moved in her artwork on the walls, her books on the shelves, her laughter filling rooms that had once echoed with silence. The legal battles were mostly behind us now. Luke and Rachel had eventually accepted a plea deal, reducing the charges in exchange for full restitution of the money they'd stolen from me. They were both serving time. Luke 18 months. Rachel 3 years due to her role as the primary instigator and her prior record of financial fraud I hadn't known about. Victor Mercer had disappeared back into the shadows once it became clear that his scheme to claim my property had failed. The police suspected he had moved on to other targets, other desperate people in need of cash who didn't understand the true cost of his generosity. Olivia had adjusted to living with me with remarkable resilience. There had been rough patches, of course, nights when she cried for her parents despite their betrayal, days when she tested boundaries to see if I would still love her when she was difficult. But slowly, we had built trust between us, creating new traditions and memories to replace the ones neither of us had been allowed to have before. We visited Luke once a month at the minimum security facility where he was serving his time. The visits were awkward at first, filled with silences and carefully avoided topics. But gradually, something shifted. Luke began to talk about the past, to acknowledge the wrong he had done, to express genuine remorse not just for getting caught, but for the pain he had caused. Rachel had me convinced that you were trying to control me, to keep me from having my own life. He told me during one visit, I was so afraid of being manipulated that I didn't realize I was already being manipulated by her. She was very good at it, I said, not to excuse him, but to acknowledge the reality. She had years of practice. That's no excuse for what I did to you, for letting her cut you out of our lives, for keeping Olivia from knowing her grandmother. He looked at his daughter, who was getting snacks from the vending machine across the room. I'll never forgive myself for that. Maybe someday you should, I suggested. Not for my sake or even yours, but for Olivia's. She needs a father who can move forward, not one who's stuck in regret. We rarely spoke of Rachel. She had refused to see either Luke or Olivia since being sentenced, preferring to cut ties completely rather than face the consequences of her actions. Her last communication had been a letter to Luke, delivered through his lawyer, seeking a divorce. He had signed the papers without protest. Now, as I watched the sun sink below the horizon, I heard the sliding glass door open behind me. Grandma, there's someone on the phone for you. I turned to see Olivia standing in the doorway, phone in hand, her expression curious. Who is it? She says her name is Margaret Chen, says she's an old friend of yours. My heart leapt. Margaret had been my closest friend before Luke married Rachel, before the gradual isolation began. We had lost touch over the years, another casualty of Rachel's systematic removal of people who cared about me from my life. Yes, she is. A very old friend. I took the phone, my hand trembling slightly. Margaret, Caroline Foster, as I live and breathe. It's been far too long. How did you find me? Luke, believe it or not, he wrote me a letter, told me everything that happened, said you might need your old friends back in your life. She paused. Is it true, all of it? If he told you he tried to steal my house and have me declared mentally incompetent, then yes, it's true. Good Lord. Margaret's voice was filled with shock. I knew something was wrong when you stopped returning my calls all those years ago. But I never imagined... Caroline, I'm so sorry I didn't try harder to stay in touch. It wasn't your fault. Rachel was very thorough about isolating me. Well, I'm back now, if you'll have me. And I'd love to meet this granddaughter of yours Luke mentioned. She sounds like quite the young lady. She is, I said, smiling at Olivia, who was pretending not to eavesdrop. When can you visit? We made plans for Margaret to come the following month. And as I hung up, I felt another piece of my old life sliding back into place, not unchanged, but perhaps stronger for having been broken and mended. Was that really Dad's idea? Olivia asked as we went inside. To call your friend, apparently so. That's good. Right. It means he's really trying to make things right. I think it does, I agreed. People can change. Olivia, sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to see clearly, but change is possible. Even for Mom, the question held such hope and vulnerability that it made my heart ache. I don't know, honey. Your mother has a lot of hurt inside her. Hurt that started long before you or Luke came into her life. But yes, even for her, change is possible. It's just not something we can control or predict. Olivia nodded, accepting this hard truth with the maturity that continually surprised me. I'm glad you changed, she said suddenly. Or maybe you didn't change, but your life did. If none of this had happened, if Dad and Mom hadn't been so awful, I might never have met you. That's true, I acknowledged. Sometimes good things come from terrible situations. The trick is to recognize them and hold on to them. Later that night, after Olivia had gone to bed, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one that faced the garden window, and reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just 6 months. I had lost and reclaimed my home. I had confronted betrayal from those I should have been able to trust most. I had faced down threats, both legal and criminal. And through it all, I had discovered a strength in myself I hadn't known existed, a resilience born from 6 years of loneliness and rejection. But I had gained something precious, too. A granddaughter who brought light and purpose back into my life. The beginnings of an honest relationship with my son, built on truth rather than manipulation. The return of old friendships I had thought lost forever. Eleanor had left me this house as a sanctuary, a place where no one could take advantage of me again. She couldn't have known how prophetic that gift would prove to be, or how it would become not just my sanctuary, but Olivia's as well. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt at peace for the first time in years. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was ours to shape. And I intended to shape it with love, honesty, and the wisdom that comes from having faced the worst and survived. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and be sure to check out 2 other stories that are channel favorites: The Day I Discovered My Husband's Secret Family and How I Outsmarted My Greedy Sister-in-Law.